of working with her a little bit. I think Dottie had it a little bit before me. I want to welcome you here tonight.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Victoria Witt. I'm the CEO of Sand Hill Center. It's always a pleasure to be here in Montgomery County. I missed last year because of COVID, and I missed everybody, and I hope everybody missed me. So I'm here tonight officially to present to you the Sand Hill Center County General Funding request. Our board, which Commissioner Crisco serves on, and prior to that, Commissioner Robinson served on, and also the other Montgomery County representative is Carol Whitaker, who some of you may know. I can assure you Montgomery County is well represented. Commissioner Crisco came on during the virtual time, and I can tell you there's never been a time when he's not been there, and we were just joking that one time he was even on camera while driving his truck. So I was not sure if the Highway Patrol needed to know that or what. Nobody reported him, but he is a very dedicated member to our board. At our March 9th meeting, the board voted for the 17th year in a row not to request any additional funding from any of our counties. So that means I'm here tonight to put in the same request I put in for the last 17 years, which is $60,775. We've been able to not have to come back to the counties for additional funding because as some of you know, back in 2012, we took on the management of Medicaid dollars. Those dollars have helped us do what we need to without having to keep coming back to the county. So that is my request tonight. I do hope that you will see fit to include that in your budget discussions. While I'm here, I just want to talk about a few things. I sent you a lot of information. I'm not going through all of it, but I just want to hit some high spots. We continue to have an excellent relationship with your schools. We are providing funding for a couple of therapists in the schools to work with behavioral health issues. We also are working with your sheriff at the detention center by providing funding for assessments and behavioral health services for the inmates there, and also video conferencing. We also have worked with DSS and public health here, co-locating a therapist at those two locations. As you know, a lot of times people cannot make it into the mental health center, so we have found working with the county agencies assist in meeting people where they're at. So we continue to have a very good relationship with those entities. In your packet is a dashboard. I know Commissioner Robinson and Crisco are very familiar with this. This is a snapshot in Montgomery County. Basically, it shows the number of people served. Unfortunately, 2020 for all of our counties took a bit of a dive because of COVID. It took a while to get remote and telemedicine up and running, so hopefully 2021 will rebound. You can see that $6.5 million of Medicaid funding is spent here in Montgomery County for folks for their behavioral health issues. And we have 161 providers who are delivering services to your residents here. And then you have a breakdown of the different disability areas of people being served. I also want to take a minute to tell you about CIT. That's Crisis Intervention Training. It is a 40-hour-a-week class for law enforcement officers. It has expanded not only from law enforcement to any kind of first responder. So that's EMS, 911, any kind of first responder. We are Montgomery County and your sheriff, they have really taken advantage of the opportunity, and we are really happy to tell you that we have another class scheduled. It's coming up soon. It's July of 2021. I would really encourage you, if you have the opportunity to attend a part of it, either the opening or the closing. You probably wouldn't have to be able to do the 40 hours, but it's really a good opportunity to see the community in action, because we have partnered with the Montgomery Community College, your law enforcement agencies, and Sand Hill Center, and NAMI to provide this training. And as you can see, we have already trained, having a little trouble here, 39. So there have, I'm sorry, that says Randolph, it should say Montgomery. There are 39 law enforcement officers here in Montgomery County who have already been trained. So would encourage you, if you're available during that time in July to attend, we would love to have you. Also, want to make you aware that we have, for the first time at Sand Hill Center, been able to open a 24-hour facility for folks with behavioral health issues. Commissioner Robinson knows that we worked on this for years, but it is now open. It is in Randolph County, but it is open to all 9 counties. And I can tell you there are already people from Montgomery County who have been served there. It is for adults. It's for folks who need crisis stabilization for 5 to 10 days. It doesn't take the place of a hospital, but it's a crisis intervention place for people to have their crisis addressed. In a couple of months, we're going to be opening one in Rockingham for children. It will be the first, well, it won't be the first, it will be the third of its kind in the state of North Carolina for children. And it, as I'm sure you're aware, behavioral health issues in kids is skyrocketing. So we are looking forward to having that facility open also. Also in your packet is our annual report. I will not go through it in detail. This will give you budget information and information on how we have dealt with the COVID pandemic in behavioral health. And then lastly, everyone has heard about Medicaid Transformation. I have stood at this podium since 2015 every year telling you it's coming, it's coming. Well, it's here. It's going to be here in a couple of months. So July 1st is when there'll be some new players in town, so to speak, that and I'm sure your DSS and Health Department have educated you, as well as the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners. I came across this the other day, and I love anything that's one page. And it's a one-page, very simple explanation of what Medicaid Transformation will mean for behavioral health and health care. Now, I'm giving this to you tonight because our other counties have found it real helpful. In a nutshell, what it means is that from a behavioral health perspective, where Sand Hill Center managed the treatment and the services for all folks in our catchment area, now there will be 5 other players. They will be healthcare private insurance companies. They will also be managing Medicaid for a certain population. However, Sand Hills will continue to manage those services for the most vulnerable, most severely ill, with the most severe difficulties, and that's for either mental health, substance abuse, or IDD, intellectual developmental disability. So I think in North Carolina, we're all in for some changes. I wanted to make sure you have this in your hand, and am happy to try to walk you through if you have any questions about what Medicaid Transformation is. But I've been to several of your county commission association meetings, and they're doing a great job in that education. So I will stop there, take a breath, and see if anybody has any questions about the budget request or anything else I presented, or any questions about Sand Hill Center.
Does anybody have anything? Well, thank you.
Okay, thank you very
As
much.
usual, you do a good presentation.
Well,
so-
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you for the one-page
Oh,
document.
well, like I say, I
Yes.
love one page.
Yes, it's
Thank
great.
you.
Our next presentation is Joe Prater, Director of Governmental Affairs, Charter Communications, Broadband and Rural Digital Opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm going to talk to you guys today about what has been a very important topic over the last year, is broadband, particularly in our more rural areas. I'm Joe Prater. I'm a Director of Government Affairs with Charter. I've been with the company close to a little over 4 years now. North Carolina, born and grown. I'm from South Wake County. And tonight I'm going to talk to you guys about what we recently were awarded in an FCC auction that's called the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. I'll kind of go over that in detail and what it's going to mean for what we'll be doing here in the county. So just to briefly kind of go over our agenda for tonight, I'm going to make it brief. I'm going to respect your guys' times. So I'm going to talk about our RDOF Phase 1 award in North Carolina, and then I'm going to break it down to what we're going to be doing here in Montgomery County, and then I'm going to talk about some other opportunities for partnership in the next coming months or few years. So briefly, this is the award that we received in North Carolina. The dark blue on that map is our current footprint, and then the green there is where we have been awarded this federal funding to expand broadband in these areas. So you can kind of see it's an opportunity to kind of interconnect where those gaps are in between the service areas. There's just some bullet points there. I won't go into the details, but it talks about how much we were awarded statewide. Obviously, we were aiming for our more rural areas. And just a little background on the RDOF. So the FCC basically took all unserved census blocks across the whole country, put it up onto an auction block and said, internet service providers, bid on which ones you can serve, and we'll help you do so to make it fiscally possible. And so Charter, our company, obviously we won quite a bit across the state, so we're excited. It's going to be a couple years to get everything done, but we're hiring a whole new construction team just to be dedicated to these specific projects across the state. I was recently put into the position where I will be handling the government affairs aspect of all of those projects across the state. So I will be your main contact if you have questions when we begin the build, and if you have constituents that may have questions about if they're in this area, feel free to direct them to me, and I'll help you the best I can. So to move into how it's going to affect the county, here's a snapshot of our winnings. In the green, CCO Holdings is Charter Communications operating. That's us, and so you'll see we've got a significant amount across the county, and particularly in the rural areas. So we're getting nearly 3,000 locations through the auction, and again, we've hired an entire new team, and we're going to try to break ground later this year. And I'll follow up to the meeting. I'll send you these slides, and then also the company has set up a website where folks can actually put in their street address, see if they're in that area, and then it has updates on timelines, the services that will be available at their particular address, and other information, kind of FAQs about the project. Again, we're very excited. This is a great opportunity, for North Carolina, for Montgomery County. And we're just excited to break ground and get going, but it's going to be a lot. It's going to be a big build across the whole state. And then lastly, I want to talk about some opportunities to partner for areas outside of our RDOF award. So I'm sure you're familiar with the NC Great Grant, which is the state's broadband fund project that they do, where ISPs can partner with counties or with localities to apply for funding from the state through NCDIT and the Broadband Infrastructure Office, which is the branch that administers that grant through DIT. It's a similar to the RDOF, where it's unserved census blocks, and then ISPs choose which of those census blocks, and you submit, this is what we are willing to pay. If you can help put this much towards it, we can make it happen. Similar process. So we can look to you guys whenever the General Assembly decides on what they're going to allot towards the next round of the Great Grant. We'll start some outreach with you guys about areas that you may want us to work with you guys to get to. Additionally, with some of the American Rescue Plan funding that's coming down, that kind of gives you a little more autonomy of how you want to use those funds, and we can certainly partner with you guys if there are particular projects that you want to allocate towards broadband expansion. You can work with us or any of the other providers to expand in those areas that we otherwise may not be able to. And that kind of is the same thing as the county funding projects. You know, as you get, whether it's American Rescue Plan or any other federal or state funding, feel free. We're always open to have those conversations about finding ways to extend to areas throughout the county. I think we can all agree COVID really exposed the need for broadband, and so we're here to help in any way we can. So I know I covered a lot, so I'm going to go ahead and open up for questions if you guys have anything for me.
Anybody have anything?
Just make sure he leaves his phone number and contact information.
Well, Frankie has that, and we'll, like I said, anytime you guys have a question, if you have a particular constituent who wants to get more information, because I'm sure you're getting contacted quite often about folks not having access.
I do have two things, Joe.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
when will we have that website that people will be able to check and see, you know, what kind of time frame are we looking at for that resource?
Absolutely. I'll send it to you either tonight or tomorrow morning,
Oh,
depending on what
wonderful.
time I
Okay,
get
so
back
it's
to
in
my
place.
house.
That's great. So that's great.
I want to say it's spectrumruralexpansion.com or something like that, but I'll get the specific address and
That would
send
be
it to
awesome.
you.
And then second, knowing, obviously, there's a map that shows all your areas that you're going to be able to work in. I'm assuming we'll have an overlay map that really shows residences, you know, people that live. So we will be able to know, too, where are those areas that
Absolutely.
you're currently not going to touch based on what your award was and what you're
Right.
looking at. So we have ability to really understand what part of our population still will not be served.
Yes, ma'am. So
Does it look okay to everyone?
Yep.
Someone like to make a motion that we accept the consent agenda?
I will make a motion that we accept and approve the consent agenda.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Dawson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Dottie Robinson. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The next item is the public forum, and I think we do have a couple of people that wants to speak. Mr. Manager, would you briefly run through the rules?
Sure. The public comment period shall be for the purpose of allowing members of the public to comment on county business or items on the Board of Commissioners' agenda. This period shall not serve as a forum for debate with the Board of Commissioners. Remarks shall be addressed directly to the board and not to staff, the audience, or the media. The chairman shall open the public comment period. Any person who wishes to speak shall approach the podium and announce his or her name and physical address prior to making comment. Any citizen desiring to comment on a matter of public interest within the authority of the Board of Commissioners to legislate in an open forum shall be allotted 3 minutes. Citizens may yield their time on a specific topic by utilizing no more than 2 citizens' time slots. This will allow up to, but no more than 9 minutes. The county manager shall notify the chairman upon the expiration of the allotted time. And I believe there are a couple of things.
Yeah, I've got them right here.
You got 'em?
The first person on there is Sheila Capel. If you would, state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening.
Thank you.
My name is Sheila Capel, and my address is 428 Arrow Trail, Bisco. And I'm here asking if we could make the Friday closest to June 19th a holiday. I already have spoken with Greg Zephyr, and he has allowed me to have every Saturday closest to June 19th from 8 to 12, close Main Street down and have a festival for vendors and stuff it's a black event to celebrate June 19th. And that's why I'm asking if we could have the Friday closest to June 19th celebrated as a holiday.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Manager, he will be looking into that, what part we would,
Thank you.
thank you, Sheila.
Thank you, Sheila. And Sheila, before you sit down, once you give him information, would you like to share with the board what you have tentatively planned for your celebration in downtown Troy coming up in June?
Sure. Right now, this is going to be our 3rd year anniversary with our Freedom March. And the last 2 years, what we've done is usually just to march from the town hall down to the railroad tracks at Troy Lumber. And the railroad tracks has been symbolic of the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad. And this year will be our first 8 to 12s, forgive me, to have the street closed off, to have black vendors, and something for kids to do as well, just to show our black-owned vendors, black-owned, forgive me, black-owned. Forgive me. Anyways, for us to see who actually has their own businesses, so that we can kind of keep an eye out for the ones in the neighborhood. So we can, of course, I'm sorry, I'm nervous.
Oh, don't
Don't
be
be
nervous.
nervous, please
I
don't.
Shouldn't be
am.
nervous.
That's why I'm asking to make it a holiday, like I say, so that, we can feel this is our Independence Day. This is when we were freed from slavery. And so many people are not aware of this, and that's to educate people on what Juneteenth is about, to let them know the Emancipation Proclamation, to let them know what June 19th is actually about. As my shirt speaks for itself, and you would be surprised as, how many people have not a clue of what June 19th is really about and what it represents. And so that's a part of, if we make it a holiday, people will learn, part of our history. I stress it so much, and yet that, the numbers have grown, but unfortunately, I can only reach but so many people. And even if I put it in the newspaper, very few people read. I still can only reach but so many people. And that's what my goal is, to educate people about what it represents. So that's my goal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Facebook probably your best bet, is let it out on there.
Well, that's what I have 3 people helping me, but people still don't read. I mean, we have a picture of it, believe it or not. And we have it there to where vendors can fill out an application, so that they can, reserve a booth. But you have to be popular, and I'm not, and that's still yet another problem, but you can reach but so many people through Facebook. So, like I say, the numbers have grown, but I think if we can make it a holiday, anytime you hear holiday, you think a free day, and I just want a holiday just to have an H there so people will pay attention, and perk their ears up just to say, there's a holiday out there and what does it mean? And they'll probably, at least it'll wake them up to try to figure out what is a holiday, because if you see President's Day as a holiday, at least they'll try to figure out what that means. Yeah, hopefully. Yeah. We can only try.
Thank you.
I'd be all in favor for a federal holiday. That gets me when I'm federal.
One day we'll get there, one step at a time, but we can but hope and pray that it'll happen, but at least if we can baby step and make it just a holiday itself, I'll be fighting for that next time.
All right.
All right,
Thank you.
so
Thank you,
much.
Ms. Casey.
The next person, I think, is Jamie Ewing.
Oh, thank you.
Jamie, if you would, your name and address, please.
Hello, everyone. I am Jamie
You can take
Ewan.
that mask off if you,
Thank you. Thank
there's
you.
a trash can probably somewhere there.
Well, it's got flowers on it.
Yeah.
She
Okay.
wants to sing it.
Yeah, I'll say this one. But my name is Jamie Ewans. I live at 205 Peach Street in Candor, the big city of Brookville, North Carolina. And I am a community connector. And I just want to say hello to everyone. I am a community connector through an organization called Better Together Montgomery. We're here in Troy, and we do healthy initiatives for our community. At our last meeting, which was May the 5th, we had a lot of concerns from our community members, and some of the issues that came up that we addressed were safety issues, lighting, and also abandoned homes, which creates a safety issue for us as we're trying to incorporate some walking trails. We're talking about doing community gardens and different things like that for the healthy initiative, but we have these issues that we need to address as a county. So as you do your upcoming budget, if you would consider some of these items in which we're addressing, just to get someone to come in and look at the lightings, which we have really no lights through the community where we'll be putting the community garden. Also, I did take some pictures of our community. We have a lot of abandoned homes there, which also creates an area where, drug users can go and settle and, commit crimes and different things like this. So these are some issues that I'm coming on behalf of our community just to see where you can, as our commissioners, help us eliminate some of these areas. So thank you.
Thank you for bringing it to us.
Okay. Would you like to see some pictures? Can you? I know.
I don't know if there's any way to do it
Or
over
if you
on the
can
screen or
forward
not.
them to Misty, she can send them to us.
Send
And
them to us.
also, Jamie, the list that you guys put together at your last meeting, could you
Okay.
leave that so at least we have ability to see what that is?
Yes, ma'am.
That would be great.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank
Will
you.
do.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. I guess the next item is the fun part, the public hearing.
Yes.
I would like to make a couple of comments.
Okay.
I didn't get a chance to sign in. I haven't been to commissioners meeting in some time, so I apologize.
Yeah, I apologize for not asking. for anything
That's
else.
fine,
I didn't
okay.
sign in. If you'd state your name and address.
Randy Green, 1175 Oakey Wimmy Road, Troy. I just had to get a few things clear about this American Rescue Plan Act, because I came across a website, and this is how I first became aware of it, saying Montgomery County is entitled to, just round it significant numbers, 5.3 million, and that'll take effect in June. My understanding is we'll get about half of it, and then 12 months later, we'll get the other half. My question is, will the towns in the county, will they get their share from that, and will it be decided upon their population?
So I will answer, I can answer real quick, and you correct me, Frankie, if I'm wrong. The towns, municipalities get separate funding.
Okay.
So there is county funding.
Okay,
And
I
then there's
just wanted-
municipality funding.
Okay, well, out of that, almost 5.3 million, if the county's budget is $33 million, that's almost 1/6 of our budget right there. And I would sure appreciate if y'all spent that very wisely, not on things like new office furniture, planting flowers, tearing down a monument, things like that, when we need, the sheriff's department, they need a lot of equipment, the jailers, we had last year when we had that middle of the day meeting, and, a bunch of department heads came forth and discussed their needs and stuff. If that money could be utilized to that, and my understanding is that it can be used for infrastructure, water, sewer, broadband, I would greatly appreciate that, because, if anything good's come out of this pandemic, I mean, this may be it. Of course, there's no such thing as a free lunch, but I just wanted to clear that up. And also wanted just to take a quick second to congratulate the newly elected county commissioners. Y'all ran a clean campaign, and that was something very refreshing, especially the national and state races that we had this year. And, well, personally, I'm tickled pink we got a Republican majority. I'm a very straightforward man. I tell it like it is. Anyway, thanks very much for listening to me and clarifying that. And y'all have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green.
Is there anyone else here that would like to speak in the public forum part? If not, I'm going to close that then, and we're going to do the first public hearing, variance 03, 04, 06, 07, 08, 2021, Cabin Creek Solar LLC. And I need a motion to recess the Board of Commissioners and convene as the Board of Adjustments.
I will make a motion to recess the Board of Commissioners and reconvene as the Board of Adjustments.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Dawson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second's been made by Commissioner Hassel. All in favor?
Aye.
Any objections? The next is the swearing in of the, or actually, yeah, the swearing in of anyone wanting to give factual evidence.
I'm sorry, did we just hold the Bible last time? Or Mr. Chris?
I don't think we did any of this. This is kind of a new
Yeah, okay.
adventure for us.
Let's do it
We,
like that. Here we
There we go.
We don't mind.
okay, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the evidence or testimony you are about to provide is factual and truthful to the best of your knowledge?
I do.
Good, thank you. The next item is the staff report.
Good evening, Board of Adjustments. I'm glad it's
I
still,
believe I can quite hear you.
Oh.
Too good.
I'll take it off.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, Board of Adjustments. Today we're hearing 6 variance cases for Cabin Creek Solar LLC project in Montgomery County. These variance requests all have to be heard individually, but they can all be heard under one public hearing, which is what we're doing right now. So we've got variance 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And I've set the slideshow up or the PowerPoint to rotate, and then it's going to continue rotating. But by all means, if you see something that you want us to stay at, we can certainly do that. In the packet that I've provided you, it's not as flashy as the packet that the applicants have provided you. They've done a very thorough job at compiling this information. And so a lot of it is replicative, so it's at least for the application element, but the staff report, deed books, zoning map, and aerial views are a little bit different in this application that I have for you. So let me just switch to the staff report real quick. The applicant is going to go over their application and the evidence that they would like to enter in on this case. So as I mentioned, this public hearing is to review 6 variance cases, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 of 2021. Property owners respectively are James and Martha Murray, Evan and Thurman Brown. Again, James and Martha Murray, Evan and Thurman Brown. AAA Enterprises Incorporated and John Fred Allen, etc. All. George and Linda Dunn. Hunter Land and Timber, LLC. And again, Hunter Land and Timber, LLC. So in the staff report portion, you will encounter a bunch of tables. I've tried to just convey the information as appropriate as possible for these 6 variance cases. Parcel ID is represented across a variety of them. In the first table, you'll see every location that's being requested to encroach item M of the photovoltaic facility standards, which is a very strict item. It's saying that there is, let me pull up the exact language because I'm drawing a blank. Apologize. Item M says that solar panels and any associated built-upon area must be located at least 50 feet landward of all perennial and intermittent waters. Natural vegetation within this buffer must remain intact. So the applicant has identified locations A through L where they would like to actually encroach this buffer area of 50 feet. That buffer area would then need to seek a variance from the Board of Adjustments to override the ordinance or to have that variance granted to the land, hence why there is 6 separate variance cases. Since variances run with the land, we've got to run these all individually. So the locations there, they're represented by a numeric value in parentheses as well. That numeric value corresponds to the variance case of each property. And then you'll see a slight description there and submission buffer encroachment table as well that details, how far up the applicant is asking to have that variance. So actually the only one of these sites that the applicant is asking for less than a 50-foot variance is site 7, variance 7, 2 sites G and H, and they need site access crossing buffer for those elements. As far as the current zoning and land use of the property, the board may remember that there was a rezoning for this case or a case related to this project, and that's this 758800065777 parcel ID. Everything is zoned residential 3. The properties surrounding them in the zoning map, you'll also see that they are reflective of residential 3. As far as watershed and floodplain, these properties are located within a floodplain, a watershed 3 Bear Creek overlay balance area. So as such, all developments must abide by watershed regulation. However, this watershed regulation offers a slightly more flexibility than this item M of the permitted standards and conditions of photovoltaic facilities. It does state that these buffer requirements that would be subject to this property are excluded for water-dependent structures, other structures such as flagpoles, signs, and security lights, which result in only diminutive increases in impervious area, and public projects such as road crossings and greenways where no practical alternatives exist from vegetative buffer requirements. So really, the ordinance is working against them on this case. As far as staff comments, I've tried to aggregate all of the applicants' comments into that one phrase, and they've done a great job at that also in their application that they've provided you. It's what's quoted there in purple text. I think most importantly, it's important to note that They've itemized 6 things here. One, that this variance does provide the site with necessary access. 2, it respects the outer boundary setbacks of the property, so it's not encroaching on the other setbacks that the property does have. 3, their proposed project meets the requirements of the NC Utilities Commission. 4, it complies with the Clean Water Act. 5, it's consistent with the engineering standards of Duke Energy. And 6, it complies with the National Electric Code. And so, in summary, the staff finding was that Section M does not provide flexibilities for water-dependent structures, etc., as I had mentioned before, that the state's Watershed 3 Water Protection Overlay District does provide for, and that this case is the case with the Cabin Creek Solar Variance application, where they do need to seek variance for this particular element. The applicant has made assurances that these activities proposed in the application will minimize the built-upon surface areas of the project, direct runoff away from surface waters, and maximize the utilization of stormwater best management practices. Now, it's an important thing to note that this variance would apply to the land indefinitely. In Montgomery County, there's a unique quirk. We record all orders granting a variance with the Register of Deeds, so they're always, affecting the property. So I've also attached to the staff report, or quickly following it, I should say, is the standards for photovoltaic facilities. This is what the applicant still has to comply with if they pursue submitting an application for a photovoltaic facility, i.e. a solar farm. And then that is followed by some quick paralegal work, accumulating all the deeds for the properties that are in question, and then also the zoning map showing or illustrating that most of the properties in that area are zoned residential 3, and also that there is an aerial snippet there trying to illustrate that this is a large project and it really takes place in that confluence area of Cole Road 2427. So with that being said, that concludes the staff report. And if do y'all have any questions for me?
Anybody have any questions?
Okay.
Thank you, David.
Yes, sir.
I guess at this time we'll get the statement from the owner.
While we're setting up some of these exhibits so you can see, I'm Tom Terrell. I'm with the law firm Fox Rothschild in Greensboro. I told Mike Commissioner Crisco before the hearing, I reminded him the last time I stood here, I was your lawyer representing you in the interbasin transfer fight with Union County. And it's good to be back. It was great to be on Montgomery County's side against Union back then, and it's good to be here tonight. With me tonight are Rex Young, representing Oakhurst Energy, and Hallie Schaefer, who is an engineer with Pine Gate Renewables. This is not a small request. This is a 1,000-acre project. It's a company that's asking to invest many millions of dollars in your economy to create a greater tax base for you. But this is a last step to sort of illustrate how humbled I am and a little bit fearful even to stand here. This is the last step in a project that started years ago. It is no small feat to assemble 1,000 acres, all the property owners, do the title search, get all of your approvals by the Utility Commission, work seemingly endless hours with Duke Energy to work with them on all of the technical requirements. Once you finally do that, you have to do your wetland studies. You have to demonstrate that there are no threatened species. You have to go through the State Historic Properties Office. You have to go to the State Tribal Historic Properties Office to make sure that there are no sacred Native American burial grounds. You have to go through the Federal Aviation Administration, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and all of these are the heavy hand of government check boxes before you can do final engineering. And when we got to that point of then having the green light to do final engineering, we realized that we had some buffer issues. And that comes to you. And we didn't anticipate being here. I'm going to call Hallie up in a minute to show you. I will point out that Pine Gate Renewables, or its subsidiary, Cabin Creek, has already spent well up in 7 figures. They want to invest in your economy. If you haven't figured it out, a solar farm is a phenomenal increase in your tax base, but it's practically a zero drain on your services. So it's a net gain. I do want to point out that we did get a letter. It was sent to David. I think y'all might have a copy of it. And the 2 women, Ms. Burnley and Ms. Hagan, said, as long as you don't hurt our property and you abide by the setbacks, we support what you do. And of course, we're going to stay off their land, and the setbacks are mandatory. So that we could compress our presentation for 12 variances and kind of do them at one time, we have a notebook in front of you. I have if you would just go ahead, I've already basically referred to the information in the introduction. If you could turn to the tab on what the state statute says. I just put this in here to let you know that we take this very seriously. We have a statutory duty to give you certain evidence that we have met these standards. I hope that when I sit down, you will have concluded that we have met it multiple times. But I will say this, one of the most respected land use commentators on land use law in North Carolina, everybody knows him, he says when it comes to a variance, if you take all the cases, all the treatises, and all the statutes about variance law in North Carolina, it comes down to 4 words, and that's common sense relief valve. And that's what a variance really is. It's just a common sense relief valve when it makes sense. If you will go to the next tab, we did put the owners in here for all the parcels where a variance is needed, just in case you needed to know where or whose property it was, or that was a point of curiosity. I'm sure that many of you know some of the property owners who's are out there, or the companies from those folks. The next tab is the master site plan. We put this in here in 11 by 17 in color, and if you won't, just feel free to rip it out and have it there so you can see, but we do have that site plan right here on the easel so you can reference it. And if you would turn to the next tab, which is called Variance Descriptions, this is where I'd like to go through these just very quickly, a high-level overview. David gave you a very good summary of what this is. And I think everybody knows that this sits right on I-73, just south. In fact, it touches Highway 24. And it's an interesting collection of parcels. The company would have loved to have had more, frankly, but everybody, doesn't choose to do this. But this will be a 70-megawatt facility that can power between 14,000 and 15,000 homes just by having panels that sit there collecting sunlight. And it's completely clean and renewable energy. We did say this in our materials. I want to highlight this, is that there are many handcuffs that Cabin Creek Solar has on it as it starts into this process. The first being, it has to have access. The second, it has to meet the National Electric Code, or it can't get its electric permits. And one of those requirements is a mandatory fence around the perimeter. So that's something that cannot be negotiated. We have to stay within the boundaries. You can't go outside on somebody else's property. That's a constraint. We have to meet the Clean Water Act. That's not difficult, not hard to understand. We have to do what the North Carolina Utilities Commission approved, and this whole thing started out with Duke Energy's engineering for the project. And once you've worked something out with Duke Energy, you can't go backwards. It's a long explanation on that. I just ask you to trust me that it takes 2 to 3 years starting from scratch. And in this case, when all of your contracts are in place and your financing is available and everything's ready to go, you can't just take that 2 to 3 years to go back in reverse with Duke. You have to maintain that. I also would like to emphasize that for these variances where the fence will have to go into the buffer, and if it crosses a creek, the Army Corps of Engineers has to look at that. That's, if you have concerns about whether that's dangerous to the stream or a wetland, U.S. Army Corps knows all those laws. We depend on them to protect them, and we will have to meet that. Now, if you would go over, these are just next ones are just several maps, but if you would go over about 4 or 5 pages to where it says variance location A, I'm going to give you a 10 to 15 second description on each, so I can give you the high level, and then we'll have our engineer come up and be completely available for questions that any of you might have. But variance location A is all about the National Electric Code requiring a fence, and it has to be around the perimeter, but we have streams that go from on-site to off-site, or off-site to on-site, depending upon which way they're going, and we have to have a way for that fence to cross. If you go to the next page, this one is a little bit different. We can go different directions here as where we put a fence and a road, but what we're trying to do when we ask you to work with us on this, if we go in one direction, we go and we take down a lot of trees next to a residential home. Pine Creek is, of the companies I work with, Pine Creek has the best culture of looking out for neighbors, taking care of neighbors, and so we ask you that we allow us to have a variance here so that we don't have to clear all the way to a neighbor's home to work in a different direction. That's what location B is really all about, but we do need a variance one way or the other on that one. The next page, variance C, this is the same as A. We have to get a fence around the perimeter. On variances, next page, D and E. Once again, these are fence encroachments where we have to get across a stream. And I'll add that the construction materials are going to be ones that minimize the disturbance. It will probably be a culvert of some sort. Almost all of these streams, except for one, are pretty small. Some of them are intermittent, but they are streams. And so there would be probably then some riprap, so it's just absolute minimal disturbance in that. And of course, that would have to be approved by the Army Corps. On variance location F, this is a different type of variance. This is an internal road. Internal roads have to be there to connect one, I'll call it a pod of panels to the next, so that you can get maintenance vehicles back and forth, so you can get your construction vehicles in the first instance. And this is, Ms. Schaefer is going to, you were meeting in a minute, it's like she's had a Rubik's Cube for several months now trying to figure out how to do the absolute minimum of encroachments here and get all of these accesses and fences worked out. On the next one, locations G and H, once again, these are access roads and they must remain internal to the site. These are access roads that are having to go between the outer boundary and the stream buffer, where the stream buffer comes right up to the outer boundary. So we got the fence in, but we need to be able to get a road in for something for a pickup truck and sometimes something a little bit wider than that. The next one is very easy to explain when you look at the pictures, and I want to have those for you. There is a bridge that is there, and they can get pickup trucks across it, and there are certain size trucks that can go across it now, and they think it's safe. But when they do construction, they're going to have much heavier equipment coming in. And if that bridge, when they do engineering studies, if it's not adequate and safe, we need a variance to do it at location I. And if you don't allow us to do location I, then they'll have to spend, I don't know how much, it'll probably in 7 figures to upgrade that bridge. And they'll have to have all that equipment down in a larger stream right there under the bridge, which probably would do some damage. But if you look at those pictures in the next few pages over there, you'll see after that how bad that bridge is. It's a bridge whose time has come. There's a picture of this is the one very large stream that is down below the bridge. And then I'm coming to variance locations K and L, and I want to pause a bit on these because these are the ones that are, all of them are needed, every single one. These are the ones that there really is no option on. And I'd like to explain it, and I want Ms. Schaefer to come up and give you the real details. But when you have a solar farm is nothing but a collection of panels out there collecting sunlight. When it causes electrons to start jiggling around, and when they hit each other, they create a direct current. That direct current goes through wires to these little refrigerator-sized things that are called inverters, and those inverters turn that direct current into an alternating current so that we can put it up on the grid. But you have to have a substation right there at what is called the point of interconnection, where you are putting it up onto the grid. It's a very expensive, heavily engineered fee. It's individual for every single solar farm at every single location. And Duke chose this site before it had any idea what was going on. And there are other reasons why this particular site works. But in order to build the substation, we have to have some poles, support poles, and some other things out there that encroach on the buffer. And I'm going to, at this point, and the rest of the notebook tabs are the individual maps that we have up here. And if you have questions, we're going to pull them up. I would like for Hallie Schaefer to come up, and just so it's very clear, I want her to explain the K and L variance that we need. Hallie, if you would. Her resume, by the way, is in the last tab of the book.
Thank you.
Good evening. I feel like I'm at a job interview now. Okay, Tom asked me to speak first on locations K and L, so I'll start with those even though they're not exactly alphabetical. I'm an engineer, not a spelling artist. Okay, so location K is what we call the line tap. So you have, as Tom described, you have your solar farm which collects all the energy and then pushes it to the grid via a substation. The substation has two parts. There's the collector substation, which will be owned by Cabin Creek Solar, and then there is a switchyard, which will be owned and maintained by Duke Energy Progress. And from there, you will have 315 kilovolt lines that run kind of east to west to the point of interconnection. So it's very hard to see on this map. You might be able to see it over here or on your full layout. There is a utility easement that runs mostly north to south through here, and that's the 115 kV line that runs through the project. And then the line tap runs from the substation switchyard to that 115 kV existing transmission line. And at that point, you have to have two structures on either side of the transmission easement in order to have the line tap. So if you imagine you've got lines running this way, you've got lines running this way, and they have to connect them. So the line tap that runs east to west will be kind of underneath in elevation. I don't know, maybe 10 feet or so. I can't remember exactly how many feet. And then they run little jumpers down to each one. So on either side of the 115 kV existing easement, they have to have structures to support those east to west lines. And that is what location K is. It's on the west side of that little creek that runs through there. And there will be 3 poles, 18 feet apart, and each one will hold one of the lines that spans across to the other side of the utility easement, where there'll be a structure that's outside of the buffer zone. That's only 2-pole structure, and then from there it'll run into the utility switchyard. This structure, it's 3 wooden poles, like I said, 18 feet apart, and they will go up somewhere in the neighborhood of about 30 feet. And then the line will connect down to across the utility easement to that 2-pole structure across the other way. Then there'll be some guy wires, because wherever you have poles that have, they have lines coming out one way, but they don't have lines coming out the other way, you have all these forces that want to pull the pole down. So you have to have guy wires to anchor those poles in place. And those will be outside of the buffer zone. But the 3-pole structure is what we were requesting to be inside that buffer. We do have to abide by the utilities regulations here, and I actually personally met the engineers with Duke Energy out there, and there's a few pictures, I think, of them. You can see a couple of guys standing on the hill. They had surveyor, they had their project manager, and they had their engineers. And we discussed, okay, what are the options for this? And they determined that that was the best option. And it unfortunately is within that 50-foot buffer to that very small creek that runs through there. So that one is the most important of all the variances, because if we had to move that, then the utility might say, okay, we're gonna have to start over, and that would set the clock back 3 years. So we really humbly ask that you guys consider that particular one. And then location L is a creek crossing so that the utility can get their construction vehicles across the creek over to the area where the location K is, so that they can build their infrastructure at that spot. So location L would be probably a simple culvert with a 20-foot, maybe 15 or 20-foot wide gravel surface road to cross that creek there. And again, as Tom mentioned, our goal is to minimize impact to all of the jurisdictional water features on the site. And by doing so, we would make sure to do that as minimally as possible.
Hallie, I'm going to ask you to stand here and answer any questions they have, but would you just affirm what I've said so that they're not taking it from a lawyer? You spent hour after hour after hour, you and your team, trying to figure out the fewest ways you could encroach on the buffer.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's not just your decision, it's also the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality will be reviewing any kind of crossing of a creek or wetland, and also the Army Corps of Engineers has to review it as well. So we do take each one of these very seriously, and just try to minimize the impacts as much as possible. A good example of that is location G and H. If you guys want to slide over there. The tricky part here with location G and H, do you guys want me to move do that? The tricky part here is we have that 115 kV utility easement that runs north to south through here, and the property lines are very narrow through this area. And so in order to get from the northern parcels down to the southern parcels so that we can have fire truck access to the inverter pads, it's actually required by fire code that we provide a site access road that can handle the weight and the size of a fire truck to go to every inverter pad in the event that there was a fire. So those site access roads going through this very, very thin point where there is, there's, I don't know how many feet that is, but it's a very, very squeezed area. And then we have the utility easement. So the utility doesn't like to have access roads running parallel to the utility lines. They don't mind so much if they're running perpendicular. So we do have a crossing of the utility easement that is kind of 90 degrees to the 115 kV lines. But what we've had to do is okay, let's go ahead and cross the utility easement, and then let's break out that site access road so we can hit those two regions on the east side of the easement and access those areas for construction and for long-term operations of the plant. And in doing so, and unfortunately we needed to go very close to the wetlands. So we're not actually crossing the wetlands with the site access road in this place, but we're coming close to it, which is why we're asking for the variances for G and H.
So, and Mr. Chairman, keeping with our desire to be efficient with your time, I think maybe the better thing is if you have questions, either Hallie or I or Mr. Young could come up and answer questions and let you just tell us what issues you might have with this.
Anyone have any questions? I guess since we're all electrical experts, we probably are a little slim. What is the life expectancy on I guess this?
We make sure to design the solar farm to last for a minimum of 40 years.
So we'll all be probably gone by then. And
Well, hopefully not.
Probably not a county commissioner by then, maybe.
The important thing, though, is that, and this is what's great, solar farms help people use land that you can only make so much money on. There are farm families all over the country now, especially in North Carolina, who are able now to keep the family farm or the land in the family because this is creating that means of production. And when the grandchild when it runs out, but the grandchild is still there, they can put it back to a farm, put it back into timber or whatever they want to. And it's a borrowing of the land, unlike a subdivision that permanently says it's no longer going to be agriculture or timber.
Well, I will say that we received this packet over the weekend and so read it, and oh my gosh, it's extremely thorough. So I was quite educated to go through it. I mean, me, a non-electrical expert. It was really thorough to understand the needs and the whys and the impact. So I appreciate that. So question-wise, I feel pretty thorough being able to.
Everybody good? You good, Kay?
And it was put in layman terms that I could understand, so that made it really nice.
Layman terms is what I do because I can't speak
Thank
electrical.
you. So it was very nice to be able to have in language that I could understand and
I
be
don't
able.
speak electrical very well either, so that's good.
So it was nice.
Well, we thank you for your time, and of course, we ask that you endorse these variances, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I guess, is there anyone else that would like to speak to this? Okay. If you'll come up and state your name so we'll have it for the record.
My name is Ken Chapel, 272 Spicewood Road, Eagle Spring.
I do know you now.
In the back corner is Mr. Edward Dunn. He is going to sell some land or rent some land to the solar farm. And I have some land located directly behind him, 52 acres, and I'm blocked. So you see my question to, this is probably this man right here. He keeps talking about, and like I said, I have nothing against the solar farm. Good. I think it's a great thing, and it'd be good for the county and everything else. But I want to know if I'm going to be able to access my land.
This is what you're working on, right?
Oh, you're Mr. Chappell.
Yes.
Yes, actually, I looked at your particular case. Mr. Dunn, of course, is the landowner that is between your property and, I think it's Cabot Creek Road.
That's right.
So he would have to grant you an easement, but we are looking at ways we could allow you to have access, and I saw 3 different ways to do that. One way would be to have an access on the west side of Mr. Dunn's property. Do you guys want to see this? I can show, I don't know if y'all are interested, or, I mean, happy to talk to you second too. But yeah, you know, this is Mr. Dunn's property, yours is up here, and King Creek or Cabot Creek is down here. So we could go on the west side with an easement, and that would, you know, would be pretty easy to do. Unfortunately, if I was you, I would rather it be somewhere else because there's a wetland right there.
That's right.
And
West side of the creek.
it's going to be low and wet, and with logging trucks, those two don't mix very well. The other option is to go on the east side, and here's where I don't know the answer to this question. Okay, I was under the impression that I don't know who the neighbor is, the residential neighbor that's right there on the east side of Mr. Dunn's property. But there's a residential property there, and our development project manager, Sean Anderson, he made it very clear to me when I was designing the site that it was extremely important to have that 100-foot setback all the way to the fence be wooded. So right now, we don't have a site access road within that 100-foot setback. It goes inside the fence there. So there's the fence and then the site access road goes through. So if we were to give you access, it would either have to encroach in that 100-foot setback, and so some of the woods would have to come down for that, and the neighbors wouldn't have 100 feet of woods between the property line and the fence. It would be like maybe 80 feet of woods, and then the road, which you would be able to use up to get to your property, and then the fence, and then the solar farm. I don't know if that's going to be acceptable, because Mr. Anderson, he's out of town this week.
I think Sean may have confused the building setback requirement with the vegetative buffer requirement. This is just without me examining it right here, but I think we would be allowed to, I think that's measured from panel to property line. So we, I think, would be able to accommodate you a path on an access route just right at the edge of the property, outside the fence, but within the 100-foot setback. So that's an option. I think the summarized version of this is there's at least 3 routes that we have already started exploring that we absolutely are not going to landlock you on this project.
One thing I can say about Pine Needle Renewables is we work very closely with neighboring landowners and our actual landowners to make sure that if we were to landlock a property, that we're paying the full amount of the property that is inaccessible. And if we can, we provide access to where they can take their logging trucks and get in there. So we're going to do everything in our power to make sure we can get back to your property.
But I think it's important to note, this is not there was deeded access has not been there. And this is not a problem that Pine Cave or Cabin Creek created, but allowing access is something that we probably can fix, and we have 3 ways to do this. I think that's what you're saying.
We just want to be good neighbors.
I do have one question just out of interest, because Mike brought up the life of solar farm, so 40 years. So who is responsible, generationally, the grandchildren decide I want to convert it back to a farm. Who is responsible for the removal and the remediation of those solar panels? Just for interest's sake.
The company is responsible for that. The company is responsible both to you, it's also responsible to the landowner to see this removed. Fortunately, it's not a hard thing to do. It's not like taking down a bunch of buildings. When you put in a solar farm, you have a hydraulic driver that just drives those, some poles in, and you just pop on some electric frames, and you pop the panels in, and it takes a long time to wire it. But when it comes time to decommission, the word meaning to remove, you just pop the panels out, throw them in a truck, you pull everything out, you pull it back up with a little hydraulic lift, and it takes what may take a year to build and construct would be a matter of weeks. And fortunately, so many of these component parts now are more and more recyclable. Recycling markets fluctuate, but in many cases, depending upon what the market is, you actually can make money by taking a solar farm out of commission and then reselling or salvaging those parts.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And
Yes,
I would
David.
like to add something too. So the applicant has submitted to Planning and Zoning Department for review a decommissioning plan.
I thought that.
That's one of the required elements of a photovoltaic facility. And so we're currently reviewing that. I didn't finish the review for you all today, but the county also has a template for what that plan looks like.
I thought I
and so-
read that in the materials, that would happen.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and excellent, thorough examination of that. And yeah, I'm glad to share the county's template. The applicant has actually devised their own, and so we're currently reviewing that and making sure it's within our standards.
thank you, David.
I guess the only question I have is concerning Mr. Chappell, his access, and I don't know if that's something that we would get in writing, or if we approved it, or how we could ensure that, I know everybody has said that.
Does he have access now?
Let me fix that problem right now. We will offer that as a condition of which variance is it in that parcel? If we, because yeah, you have the authority to impose conditions by statute on the issuance of a variance, and we're glad to hand you the handcuffs to put on us to make sure that happens.
Want me to explain it?
Yeah, which variance letter is
If
it?
you look at location F, you'll see the Dunn property there to the north of the road. Location F, of course, is on the south side. So look to the north there, and you'll see the site access road goes inside the fence for a ways, and then it pops back out of the fence, and then it continues north toward locations H and G. What we would prefer to do is to take that, keep the fence where it is, but take the site access road to the east of the fence through that section so that Mr. Chappell can get his logging trucks along that road, and then somewhere just to the north of Mr. Dunn's property would head out to the west to access his property for logging purposes in the future.
And what I think, but for your purposes of a condition, what we would offer is that as a condition of locations F, G, and H, we shall provide proof to your planner that we have provided access to Mr. Chappell.
Yes, and just for clarity, that would be variance number 6 and 7.
Okay.
So that is elements, locations F, G, and H.
Okay. Thank you. And we're glad to offer that.
Thank you. Okay.
Is there any other public comment concerning this variance? If not, I would like to have a motion to close the public comment period and reconvene as Board of Commissioners, I think is that the correct, no?
Board of Adjustments.
Board of Adjustments.
We've still got to vote on them all.
Would someone like to make that motion?
Would you like to walk us through each one, how we should do those?
I'll do my best. So there are 6 variances. which represents the 6 property owners. What was indicated in the presentation was locations among those 6 parcels, but 6 different parcels, so a variance for each parcel. And the first one would be VR 03-202-2021. So they would need a motion for, approval or disapproval of a variance for that parcel, and then each parcel thereafter, number 4, number 5, number 6, number 7, number 8.
And if I can supplement that, so on this table of the PowerPoint, I've tried to flesh it out just like that. So we've got variance ordered by number, so 3 all the way to 8, the ordinance reference, and then the description and request. So what that would look like is granting everything at 50 foot, because that's what the applicant's requesting, so if that's what you guys would like to do, all the way up to variance 7, requesting a 40 foot, but also describing the condition that you've just imposed on variance 6 and 7
Yes, we'll
Correct.
include that in our,
through the adoption.
okay?
Okay, would someone like to make a motion that we accept the first variance, either approving or disapproving? It would be variance 03-2021.
Okay, I make a motion that we accept the variance for variance number 03-2021 with a 50-foot buffer encroachment.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Hassel. Do I have a second?
I will second that.
Seconded by Commissioner Dawson. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The next one is variance 04-2021. Do we have a motion to accept or deny this one?
I make a motion that we accept the variance 04-2021 with a 50-foot buffer encroachment.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Hassel. Do I have a second?
I second.
Seconded by Commissioner K. Robinson. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The next one is variance number 5-2021. Would someone like to make a motion to accept or deny this one?
I make a motion we accept variance 05-2021 with a 50-foot buffer encroachment.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Hassel. Do I have a second?
A second.
Seconded by Commissioner Dottie Robinson. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The next one is variance 06-21, and I guess we need to, can we include both 07 with that one
If,
and with the conditions?
yes, if you desire to place that condition on this variance approval, I believe, tried to write the wording, the applicant has agreed to a condition that they shall provide proof of access to the planning department for Mr. Chappell's property.
Would someone like to make a motion for 06 and 07 with these conditions?
I will make a motion for 06 and 07, that they will provide with the condition, they will provide proof to the planner that they have provided access to Mr. Chappell.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Dawson. Do I have a second?
I second.
Seconded by Commissioner K. Robinson. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the last one is variance number 8-2021. Someone like to make a motion to accept or deny?
I make a motion that we accept the variance for 08-2021 with a 50-foot buffer encroachment.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Hassel. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Commissioner Dawson. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. So it looks like all those were approved.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So is now when we need the motion to come back in as the,
You actually have another
Have a number.
oh, you want to go ahead
hearing,
and do
so
that one
just
too?
continue on in session.
You have to swear these people in for the tech pin.
Yes, sir.
Do we have to swear any new people in for that one?
Yeah.
David is under oath already.
I'm under oath
Is there
already.
anybody here?
So
We'll need to,
anyone else,
Yes.
Mr. Penland would need to.
The next item is the variance 0910-2021 Tech Penland. If there's anyone here we need to swear in.
y'all will just put your hands on the Bible.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the evidence or testimony you are about to provide is factual and truthful to the best of your knowledge? Thank you. So you're up, Dave, for the staff report.
I'm up. All right. Good evening again, Board of Adjustments. Variance cases 9 and 10 are what we have before us currently. Similarly to the last variance, it's important to keep in mind that these run with the land. This is why the applicant is seeking 2 variances. So the packet that you have before you is not nearly as robust. We don't have an additional binder to supplement it. But what I will say is that we've got 7 attachments here. The first is, of course, the applicant's application. Following is the staff report, followed by a preliminary recombination survey, which you may have seen come across the screen. That is followed by the plat of origination. So I believe it's dated 1968. And then the zoning map and aerial review of the property. So just to start off, just to be clear on Mr. Penland's request, who's here today, is that his request is for 2 parcels identified in Variance 9 and 10 for minimum required lot width of 80 feet to be waived to a degree that maximizes the minimum use of the property that he was seeking. And so we'll get into that a little bit soon too. The first property is Variance 9. This property is located at 549 Green Gap Shores in Troy, North Carolina, 27371, excuse me. Also parcel number 658900772284, and you can see it there with the signs. I drove out to put up the signs, of course. That's a mandated public hearing notice, so we must do that. The second property is located across the street, highlighted in blue in the depiction there. That property is it's not 911 address, but it is further identified as parcel ID 658900771377. So currently, the zoning map just displayed. The zoning in the entirety of the Green Gap Shores neighborhood is in fact R2. So this request for a variance is not affecting the zoning. That's very important to note. However, the variance in nature is what's being proposed in that preliminary recombination survey attachment. So if you have any questions throughout this presentation, what's actually being requested, it's important to refer back to that. Essentially, the property at purchase was 2 separate lots. When Mr. Penland acquired the property shortly thereafter, he recombined the lot, and now he's got what we would like to call a conforming lot. It meets the minimum lot size requirements. It meets the minimum lot width requirements of the county. What Mr. Penland is seeking is to subdivide his 2 lots. There's a house on each of these lots, or what he would like to call lots. He would like to subdivide this property so that one primary dwelling unit is represented on each proposed lot, Lot 6A and 6B, and that these lots then be combined with his property across the street to make a lesser non-conforming lot. And so what that looks like is it would meet the minimum lot size requirements of 20,000 square feet. If he is allowed by the Board of Adjustments to combine across the street as a condition of his variance requests. But it would not meet the minimum lot width requirements of the county's ordinance. And so the minimum lot width requirements are that there is 80 feet of width in the count for a lot to be conforming. And so Mr. Penland, although he's got two conforming lots, he is seeking to go into non-conforming 2 lots, but he's trying to supplement that by combining them across the street.
On that map that you have, that's when we get to it, when it rolls back around, that has
Yeah.
it highlighted, where would that lot be located in reference to those? Right there. Oops.
If you escape
Right there.
the
There it is.
presentation because it's on auto rotate, are you speaking of the 1377?
Well, we have those 2 lots, right, that what is is 2284, that's the one that got combined?
Right, so
Okay.
if you'll pull out truthfully, this is a confusing case, and so I want to make sure I do it justice. So we'll stay on this page for a little bit. If you'll pull out the plat, the preliminary plat that I've provided. So the northerly portion of what's illustrated on this plat is in fact that highlighted 1377 lot.
Okay.
Now, what's illustrated in the southerly portion is in fact lot 2284. And so what Mr. Penland is seeking is to subdivide lot 2284, almost split it in half, and then combine each of those new lots with property across the street that's also subdivided, so that 1377, he's looking to split both of them. And so by doing this, if he were to combine them across the street, he's meeting a minimum lot square footage requirement, but he's still not meeting the minimum lot width requirement. However, that being said, the character of this neighborhood, I don't think there is a conforming lot in the entirety of the neighborhood. It's within the neighborhood's character that they are non-conforming. And so I think, when I get into the meat of the authority, you guys have to grant variances. There's 2 ways to look at it. This idea of hardship. Was this hardship created by Mr. Penland through recombining these lots? Or was this hardship created by the subdivision and its origination in 1968, not accounting for the lot size standards that we have today in the county, right? So, but I do want to make sure that you guys understand what is kind of being proposed here. It's splitting almost both of those lots and then combining them across the street. Before we move on, do you guys have questions on that?
I do have one other question.
Yes, ma'am.
So 2284, that is now combined, that we want to split. It used to be split and it was combined. It now has 2 homes on there, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Were those homes built on that property after it was combined, or?
They were there prior to its recombination.
Okay. Any other questions before he moves along?
So basically, each of those 2 lots is going to be divided in half, and then the halves will be considered a property
Correct.
Right?
together.
Yeah.
Correct. So recall what we did for the Lynn Ruth case, the last variance case the Board of Adjustments heard. A condition you all imposed on him was to combine that lot that was in the middle. I call it the diamond lot. It was just in the middle of this almost cul-de-sac-like neighborhood with his primary property. And this way, you know, he was able to respect the integrity of the neighborhood, to account for public safety, and then also similarly to make that lot conforming.
But it was on the same side of the road, was it not? Or was it across the road too?
It was almost like a donut,
Yeah,
like,
that's
so it
right.
was
I remember.
encompassed by a street. There's a lot in the middle, and then Mr. Ruth's property was there, and he combined it. Yes, so and I try, in the table prior, Missy, if you could go to that, I try and define what we define a lot as. It doesn't have to be necessarily contiguous, right? It does, of course, need to touch. But it doesn't have to be contiguous in the sense that a road can't cut through it. There are plenty of instances where roads cut through lots for a variety of reasons. So although it's a little foreign to think of it like that, but that's what's being requested here. And then for lot width, the county actually defines it as, it's a somewhat confusing definition, but it's the average horizontal distance between the side lot lines measured at the from line of the building or proposed building. And so he's got these two buildings that are on the property. One is actually in conformance with its minimum lot width. If this preliminary plat is followed through on, Lot 6A identified on that would be, you know, meeting all the standards of the county. It's this other lot 6B, that would not be meeting those standards. Now I know we're seeking a variance on both, and that's because, remember, variances run with the land. And so when we're talking about applying a variance to the lots as they currently stand, it would need to be on both lots for them to be subject to this.
Anyone else have any questions for me?
And I do have more that I do need to
Yes.
convey.
Absolutely.
But I'll just move right on into kind of the staff comments of the case leading into the staff findings, and then we'll give Mr. Penland an opportunity to defend his case. So obviously we have 4 conditions that need to be met to grant a variance, right? These conditions are unnecessary hardship, would result in the strict application of the ordinance. It shall not be necessary to demonstrate that in the absence of the variance, no reasonable use can be made of the property. And so in response, the applicant has stated the strict application of this ordinance will prevent our retirement at this site. We would have to sell the current lot that they have, where they also plan to retire. And so following that, staff has made, you know, a comment to that saying that the applicant's hardship is financial in nature, but it's also, you know, as I mentioned before, there might be some hardship with the neighborhood when it was originated, right, in 1968. They weren't accounting for the county's planning and zoning standards that we have today. So I try and get to that. Long ago, the lots were subdivided into grandfathered non-conforming status. And now the applicant is seeking to convert the lot that he currently has similarly to the way it was when he purchased it, and then recombine it across the street so that he's at least a lesser non-conforming lot. Number 2, the second condition that must be met is that the hardship must result from conditions that are peculiar to the property, such as location, size, or topography. So, as I mentioned, all of the lots in the Green Gap Shores neighborhood are in this predicament of being non-conforming. truthfully, I do not know of a single lot that's conforming other than these. And so they are peculiar in size. Variance 2, 2020 actually took place in the Green Gap Shores neighborhood for the same subject. So this neighborhood does have a history seeking variance requests. And it's just something, you know, when an ordinance is developed, it tries to capture everything. There's always some things that slip through. Number 3, the hardship did not result from any actions taken by the applicant or the property owner. This is one where staff has reservations on, of course. You know, the applicant had recombined his lot, but I think it's up to the Board of Adjustments to determine, is that hardship at that moment, or is that hardship when these lots were originated, when this subdivision was originated? And so I think the applicant's going to speak to that a little bit more. And then number 4, the request variance is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the ordinance, such that the general public safety is secured and substantial justice is achieved. The applicant absolutely believes all of the above in that condition. Staff, you know, recognizes that the intent of this variance is to subdivide a current conforming lot, into a non-conforming lot. But it's doing that in the request to subdivide it back to its time of purchase by Mr. Penland. So it's not always been conforming. The applicant's intention is to sell the property at the time of subdivision. Now, if granted, this variance would not pose any safety, security, or injustice concerns. The staff doesn't believe that to the neighborhood. And so my final findings on this case are that Mr. Penland requested initially an additional variance standard to reduce his primary property's minimum lot size requirement as well. You know, he was actually coming in not just seeking a minimum lot width requirement, he was seeking a minimum lot size variance and minimum lot width variance. But through diligent work, he's come up with this plan to make a lesser non-conforming lot by combining the properties. Still, it's non-conforming, but you know, he's trying to demonstrate that good faith. As a disclaimer, I've mentioned this before, the variance runs with the land, and so that means no matter what, if this land were to change ownership, I mean, it's always recorded. So it will always be like that. The context of this parcel indicates that it's comprised of 2 prior parcels known as Lot 5 and Lot 6. And we're talking about the primary parcel that's most southerly. It's also illustrated on the plat map that I've made reference to that's dated 1968. So this thing's old. The variance, as I mentioned before, it will not change the zoning of the property or allow any use that's not permitted in a residential 2 district. And as a disclaimer, staff finding was made prior to any presentation of the applicant or the property owner. You know, it's the responsibility of the property owner to come up here and defend his case, submit sufficient evidence on his case's behalf, and then also ensure that he meets the 4 required policy guidelines. So with that being said, that's my presentation, but I realize this is a very complicated case, and I'm more than happy to try and offer any clarity if there's additional questions. I'm glad to offer any insights, anything you might have for me.
Thank you, David. Anybody have anything? Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Mr. Penn?
Thank you for this opportunity to talk with. This is my wife, Jeannie. We own the property together, and the property's been our lives since 2008 we bought the first piece of property there at a recommendation of a friend. And we've loved it. We raised our family there, our grandkids. You can see we're aging a little bit now. And the kids don't come as often as they used to, and we don't need all the property. We would like to retire there and be permanent residents. And in order to do that, we have to do this configuration that has been presented to you. We thought we moved 50 feet over and reconstituted into a house, when we were all together. Never knowing that it would be this kind of trouble to, go back to the way that we need to at this time. So we were there in 1988. In 1995, we bought a house which included that lot across the road, 5D. And that lot it had some storage area on it, but nothing's there. And in talking with David and Ms. Manus about the possibility, we wanted to take the 3 lots and make it as much meeting the ordinance as we could. And so I think we've tried we would like to continue our life there.
Well, when we put the lots together, our attorney never said, you're gonna have a hard time. We were just oblivious to that,
So,
and we were shocked.
and the ordinance that we're conforming to now, we didn't know until we started talking with people. I mean, that is absolutely new, and I don't think there's any lot out there that meets the current ordinance.
And there's nobody on this, there's the lake.
This wouldn't bother
There's
anybody.
an empty lot beside us that nobody can do anything with. I don't think it can perk or anything. And then there's our lot across the street. So it's kind of like, it's almost like private, we're not infringing on anybody.
So, question for us.
Yeah, anyone else have any questions for me? Okay,
No,
thanks.
now that he explained it, makes sense, trying to figure that out, I
Thank
think
you.
it makes sense, so thank you.
Thank you.
Need a motion to close the public comment period.
I'll make a motion, we close the public comment period.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Hassel to close the public comment period. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Commissioner Dawson. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So next, we need a motion to approve or deny variance 092021. And do we need to do these separate or? Okay. So would someone like to make a motion for the variance 0921 to approve or deny?
I will make a motion that we approve variance 09.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Dawson to approve variance 09. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Hassel. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The next is a motion to approve or deny the variance 10-2021.
I make a motion that we approve the variance on 10-2021.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Hassel to approve variance 10-2021. Do I have a second?
A second.
Seconded by Commissioner Dottie Robinson. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So your variances have been approved.
Thank you.
And we enjoyed having you there all the time.
Now I can go eat and not throw up.
Would someone like to make a motion that we adjourn the Board of Adjustments and reconvene as the Board of Commissioners?
I'll make a motion that we.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Kay Robinson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Hassel. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The next is the county manager's reports. Thank goodness.
Well,
Yeah, pretty good.
I will keep it brief, although the real subject matter I'm going to comment on is very, very important and detailed and can be lengthy. So much of my last few weeks have been spent learning and crafting the proposed budget for the upcoming year. It's certainly been a learning experience, and I'm grateful that I have a final product, and Misty and I sent it your way about 5 o'clock, I think. So the full document is available to you. It's available to the general public as well. It will outline our budget plan for the upcoming year, focusing mostly on operating budgets. With that being said, I'll go over some really high-level information regarding the proposed budget, and then we'll let you guys absorb the information I sent to you, and we'll reconvene in a couple weeks and have a budget workshop to get into some greater detail. Next year's budget, the total, what I'm going to call the operating budgets, is a little over $40 million, which is actually a slight decrease, almost 3%. But keep in mind, we had some COVID monies that came in last year that won't come back next year, so that would explain part of the overall decrease. The primary government services fund is the fund that gets all the attention. That's where you levy your taxes, where most of your services are provided. It's actually at a slight decrease, about 1.5%. The total budget is almost $34.5 million. Water and Sewer Operations Fund would be the second largest operating fund we have. It's actually at a slight increase, at 1.25% increase. The other operating funds are decreasing by a little over $600,000, which is a 9.4% decrease. What most folks want to know is, what are you proposing for a tax rate? Well, same thing. 61.5 cent general tax general tax rate per $100 of valuation. What does a penny equal? $343,000. Water rates are proposed to remain the same. The fire tax districts, we do have one district that is seeking a change from 1 penny to 2.5 cents per $100, and that's the Wadeville district. And one thing I will mention that was mentioned tonight is the American Rescue Plan Act. The funds that are coming our way, roughly $5 million, a little over $5 million, that is not included in the proposal, because that is going to be non-recurring monies and will probably be the source for a capital project budget once we have a little more information on how we can spend the money and we identify some potential uses for those funds. So that's the budget. That's the real high-level highlights. Where does our money come from? The primary government services fund is the one of most concern. We get most of our money from property taxes. Property tax rates staying the same. It's still able to support our operations and debt service and things like that. The next slide is, where does our money go? Education is the largest piece of the pie. Public safety and human services, they're right there behind it. And then we have some debt service that would also apply to public safety and education. I believe we have debt service for the detention center and some school projects. So that would add to the expenses for those particular functions. But that's the really high-level summary of the budget that's proposed. Again, the full budget document was released this afternoon. Should be in your email. If you have trouble with that document, do let us know. We actually had some trouble ourselves combining the files. But nevertheless, please digest that, ask me any questions, and we'll have our budget meeting on the 1st at 6 p.m. and we can get a little further into the details. But very important subject, very important time of year for the county.
In your report, does it indicate the reasoning for Wadeville asking for an
Briefly,
increase?
it does. It's largely for station improvements and safety improvements at the station. Their tax base isn't what, although there's some large taxpayers in their district, their base isn't what Tillery and Baden, their base is, and it doesn't generate. Now, there's a breakdown in that report of the base, the rate, and what that yields to the department.
Thank you.
Each department, actually. And that's all I have for you guys tonight. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer those.
Does anyone have anything else?
I'm excited to go through all the stuff. It'll be interesting to learn. Sales tax, with everything last year with COVID and moved into this year, did we see major decline in revenue that came
No.
from that? I didn't think so.
No.
But, so we feel confident that number will.
Sales taxes, a year ago when local governments were crafting their budgets, there was a great deal of uncertainty.
Yeah.
We were just slowing down as a nation and locking down in some areas. So no one knew what was going to happen to the economic activity for the next year. So most governments, including Montgomery County, rightfully so, were very conservative with those elastic type revenues. So sales tax was estimated conservatively. And there's a brief comment on that in the package, but sales tax receipts are anticipated to increase next year. Part of that is because there was a conservative estimate this year. And so it looks like a drastic increase next year, but it's really an adjustment for the conservative nature in the current year, which was totally appropriate considering the times. Now, there is one factor in sales tax that my crystal ball is extremely fuzzy when it comes to this factor, and that's your population. We depend on population to determine how much money we get relative to the local governments in the county, and also how much comes from the state, depending on the different articles of sales tax. So the census information will not be released till, I believe, August. Is that right, Mr. Putnam?
That's correct.
Obviously, that's 2 months after we adopt our budget. We could do an interim budget, but that's probably not enough a reason to do that. But nevertheless, it can affect your revenues. And if there's a bad population estimate for a community, you could be stuck with that estimate for 10 years. And that could affect some of your revenues, sales tax being the foremost revenue that depends on your population. So that's a variable that I cannot accurately predict at this point, but believe that we've budgeted appropriately that we could handle a disruption if there were to be one in the population estimates.
I guess it's just a bad thing we didn't have a Lowe's Hardware, because I don't think they slowed down any at all till now a little bit now.
Record-setting.
So that's right. We don't have a Lowe's Hardware, but some sales tax, regardless of where it's purchased in the state of North Carolina, we get a piece of it.
Right.
And that's back to our population. It's relative to our population how much we get. And so,
Because there's state tax,
yeah, but it's still, we benefit much more if it's purchased right here in Montgomery County. So that is where we are assured to bring in some of the sales tax money for some of the articles, or one of them in particular. So it's still much more of a benefit to buy it here.
Yeah.
I guess that's where Walmart did help us a little bit on that part, because it was about the same as Lowe's. Every time I went by there, the parking lot was basically full.
Yeah. Sales tax receipts have been surprisingly good for local governments.
I tried to do my part.
Lots
Every
of
day I
people
was
shop
there,
local,
believe
so
it.
that's good. All right.
Does anyone have anything else? Y'all ready to go home? I think the out is cold, and I don't know, Kay's got hers.
It's cold in here.
So would someone like to make a motion that we adjourn? Okay, nobody wants to go home?
I
so
make a
let's-
motion that we adjourn.
Motion's been made by Commissioner Dottie Robinson, seconded by Kay.